Now, there are three main types of LEQs. We're going to start first with causation. Okay, so there are three types of essays are causation, comparison, and CCOT. Okay, we're going to start you out with in my opinion, the easiest type, and that's causation. Okay, so when you're reading an essay prompt and you look at the essay, one of the things you should figure out is what type of essay is it. And it's if this one's causation, all you're answering here is why does this happen, or what's the result of what's happening. It's very simple. You're either going to try to figure out the cause of the event or the effect of the event, and that is called causation. Okay. All right. So your prompt this time for this essay, and this PowerPoint has been shared in the assignment, so don't worry about it if you want to just sit back and listen, or if you want to take notes. It's all going to be there for you. The causation prompts for this LEQ is analyze the economic, social, and political factors that led to the development of slavery in the British North American colonies in the 1600s. So it's important when you read through this prompt, you figure out, number one, what type of essay is it, okay? Now, an easy clue here that tells you that this is causation is it says factors that led to the development. Okay, those are keywords that tell you that they're asking for causes. Okay, you're going to see a lot of that led to or resulted from. Led to is cause, resulted from is effect. Now, it's important to understand also, secondly, that you need to look at what is the time period they're asking you about. Okay, well, they're asking you for everything that happens in the development of slavery prior to 1700. So when you're writing your essay, if you write something about something that happens in the 1700s, that's not really going to be addressing the prompt. Now, that can be used for a different part of your essay, and I'll explain that in a little bit. It's not like it's totally wrong, but when you're looking for causes, don't write something that's in the 1700s, because that's not necessarily a cause of the development of slavery, okay? Notice how in this particular prompt, and College Board won't always do this, but this is your first essay, and we kind of wanted to give you a little bit of help here, is that we put in there economic, social, and political. Sometimes they're just going to say, analyze the factors that led to the development of slavery. Okay, we're trying to give you a little bit of help here by adding that economic, social, and political in there to give you some direction. Okay. All right. So the first thing you need to do when you're looking at LEQ is that you need to figure out what got you to the point of bringing slaves into North America. Okay. So we need to start thinking about this as very linear. The first thing you're going to do is something called pre-contextualization. Okay, this is going to go in your introduction. This is like, okay, tell me how we got to this point. So the best comparison I can give you for pre-contextualization is if you've ever watched, okay, so I'm going to use Netflix. So you guys watch Netflix, right? And you guys binge watch shows, like you're watching a ton of shows and at a time, okay? So when you turn on an episode of a series, a lot of times they'll give you they'll either do a season recap or an episode recap, right? Where they'll tell you, hey, this is what happened previously on this show. Here's what happened. Here's how we got here. Okay. And sometimes they'll pick and choose episodes that are like way far away, but they're related to the episode that's coming up, right? So like if they'll talk about, like a particular character, they'll bring up a character. He may not have been in the episode before, but he was in an earlier episode. They'll bring him up in the recap so you know what's going on. That's called context. Imagine watching an episode of, I don't know, what shows you guys binging right now? Give me an example. What's popular? I don't know, because I watch like a lot of stuff. I'm running out of shows to watch. Well, I'll just say The Walking Dead because I have that up there, okay? Imagine watching like an episode in the middle of season 3 without any kind of recap. You're going to be lost. You're going to be like, I have no idea what's going on. I've never watched this show. I need context. I need you to tell me what's happening. How did we get to this point? Okay? So what do? If you can't watch the seasons, you go on YouTube and you look up season 1 recap, season 2 recap, season 3 recap, and it'll catch you up. That's what your pre-contextualization is. It's a recap of what's happened up to this point in case you don't know what's going on. You have to assume that your grader has never watched season 1 or 2 of The Walking Dead, and you got to explain to them how we got to season 3. Does that make sense? Okay. You're going to do that in 3 to 4 sentences. Another example is Star Wars. And I don't like to use Star Wars because not everybody's into Star Wars. But you know how when you watch a movie of Star Wars, they have that crawling explanation. Okay, that's context. That's telling you how we got to this point. Are we good so far in pre-context? I'm going to show you now how to do it, step by step. Step 1, we already figured out, what is the prompt asking? The prompt is asking for the cause of slavery. Okay, so number 2, we got to figure out what caused that situation. So why did they decide to start bringing in slaves? What led up to that point? Okay, so we got to figure out some of the early stages of that. All right, so you're going to use the ACE strategy here. You're going to answer that question, number 2. What caused the situation in the prompt? Okay, you must always cite a vocabulary term that supports your answer. Okay, and you're going to explain how that evidence proves your answer. Okay, so you're going to explain how slavery came to be a choice in the colonies in the early 1600s. Like, how did we get to that point? Because remember, that wasn't the first labor system we had in place. Okay. So what I would use for pre-contextualization is I would talk about the West Indies. I would talk about the West Indies for the British and the Spanish, and how they decided over time that natives were not a good labor source and that Africans were a much better source of labor for the sugar plantations of the West Indies. I would use that as my pre-contextualization. And yes, I'm giving you the answers. Okay? Because in these essays, Mr. C and I are going to give you the steps, and then you got to put it all together. Okay? The last thing I would do, and this is how and let me back up and say this. I'm not teaching you how to get 6 points on your LEQ. I'm teaching you how to write a good essay. Now, I keep in mind, I know most of you are in AP English. This essay is not an English essay. Ms. Fisher teaches you how to write English essays. I'm teaching you how to write an evidence-based historical essay. Okay? So, a good historical-based essay has a transition sentence from the introduction, from your contextualization into your thesis. Tie this together. You are telling me a story. Okay? Any questions so far on the pre-context? Does that make sense? You're telling me how we got to this point. How did we get to episode 6 of season 3 of The Walking Dead? I have no clue. I have watched the show, but I'm saying, like, if I never watched it, you got to tell me how we got there. Okay? If you have questions at any point, please interrupt me. Okay? And I will stop and answer them. All right, let's keep going then if there's no questions. All right. Now, what you're going to do is, if you're on the day of the exam and you're writing your LEQ, you got to figure out, okay, how are we going to organize this? Now, in the prompt I gave you the way to organize it, right? I gave you 3 categories. The way to come up with categories, if they're not in the prompt, is to use the themes of a push. And we use an acronym, which we might shorten later on. It's called SPACEMEN. These are the 8 themes of a push: social structures, politics, America and the world, culture and society, economics, migration, environment, and national identity. Now, we gave you categories. What were the 3 categories we gave you in the prompt? Political, economic, and social. Okay, or culture, society. So, since this is your first one, we're going to give you the categories. but you're not always going to have those. So what you need to do is memorize the spacemen and say, hey, you know what? I'm going to use migration, or I'm going to use economics, or I'm going to use environment. This is a good way to figure out how to organize your paper. So you have three categories that you can organize the causes. So let's think, you're going to think about, what are the political causes of the development of slavery? What are the economic causes of the development of slavery? What are the cultural, societal causes of the development of slavery? I'm going to help you out with that because this is your first one. Okay. Are we good so far? All right. Now I'm recording this so you can always go back and rewatch this video if you need to. All right. So what I would do is I would draw a little chart, and in your in the handout that's attached to this, there's a chart in there, so you can actually fill it out if you want on your own. So in your chart, you put your three columns there. Don't worry about the A, B, and X yet. I'm going to go over that in a little bit. Okay. So here are. Let's start first with politics. I'm going to give you the causes of slavery. The political cause of slavery, of course, is Bacon's Rebellion. Remember, indentured servants rising up caused a lot of political strife in Virginia, led the leaders to push for the use of slaves. Okay? Economics. Notice how there are more economic ones than political and social. Economically speaking, we had the headright system, right? Remember that led to it? That was the idea of bringing over indentured servants. Okay? You had improved conditions in England. That means less people are coming over as indentured servants, which means you have less available labor. The Royal African Company's monopoly ended. That means there were more slaves available to be brought into the colonies. Slavery was significantly more profitable. Remember, you got your slaves for the entire time of their life. You not 7 years. Culturally in society, what it does, slavery creates that aristocracy, that elevated social status for planters. It really creates those extremely wealthy individuals. All right, so let's talk about the A, B, and the X. Out of those three, you have to come up with your strongest cause of slavery. And based on this chart, what would be the strongest cause of slavery out of those three categories? Economics, okay? So I'm going to make that my A. My second strongest, I chose Bacon's Rebellion because I know a lot about it. So I'm going to choose that as B, my second strongest argument. My weakest argument is going to be social. So I'm going to choose that as X. Okay? X. It's important you remember that because I'm going to give you a formula for the thesis. You're going to use that. Okay? Good so far. All right. Let's talk about the thesis. You're going to rank the causes 1 through 3. We did that already. You have your economic as A, your political as B, or 2, social as 3, or X. Okay? Your X statement is going to be the weakest. Your B statement is going to be the second strongest. Your A statement is going to be the strongest. Okay? You're going to put those together. You're also going to have what's called a Y statement, which is like your overall argument. Okay? Let's put it all together. Your thesis is going to be, although X, A and B, therefore Y. So I'm going to give you a sample thesis. Please do not use this in your essay. I'm giving you an example. Although an elevated social status was a significant cause, a labor shortage and internal rebellion did more to cause the development of slavery. Therefore, the British North American colonies developed slavery as a labor system because of economic and political factors. Notice how I did not use economic and political in the A and B. Because if you just tell me, although there were social causes of slavery, there were also political and economic ones. That's not specific enough. That will not get you the point, okay? You can use economic and political in your therefore statement, but do not use it in your X, A, or B. Also, do not use a vocabulary term in X, A, or B. That's too specific. Save your vocabulary for your evidence. Just give me a general sense of what happened. So be a little somewhere between political and saying Bacon's Rebellion. Notice how I said an internal rebellion. I was more vague. Does that make sense? Okay. So a lot of people will mistakenly put vocab terms in the thesis. That is too specific. I mean, yes, it technically answers your question, but it doesn't flow correctly. And what if you change your mind in the middle of your essay and decide not to use those examples? So you're going to really kind of tie yourself to that. So don't use vocab terms in the thesis. That is an example of a thesis that counts. Okay, there's basically a compound sentence plus a therefore statement. There's two sentences. This must be written in your introduction, and then you must write it again in your conclusion. Here's your reason why. As you're doing this on the day of the AP exam, AP graders have told me over and over again that the thesis that you write at the end of your paper is always better than the one you wrote at the beginning. So I want you to get into the habit of writing a thesis twice. Now, since I'm giving you a week to do this, your thesis will probably be the same in the beginning and the end. But it's important that you get in the practice of writing it twice, because when you do a timed writing later on, like on the AP exam, as you're writing the essay, you might have a better idea of what your thesis should be after you're done writing it, and you put it in your conclusion. When they're grading your essay, they look at the intro and the conclusion for your thesis. They pick whichever one is better. And I will do this when I grade yours. I will look for which one is better. If your second one's better than your first one, that one counts as your point. Okay? Are we good on the thesis? Does that make sense? It's although X, A and B, therefore Y. If you remember that, then you should be good on the thesis point. My students do very well on thesis points. Ever since we implemented this formula, our scores have skyrocketed, especially last year when we had 2/3 of our students pass the exam because of the DBQ. They nailed the thesis. Okay? You use this, I guarantee you. The guy who came up with this gets like 99% of the thesis points. I mean, it works. Okay? We good so far? How much time we got? We good on time? All right, I got to go a little faster. Okay, so the reason why I've made you do ACE so much is because this is what you're going to use in all of your writings. You're going to use ACE in the essay. Okay? All right, let's talk about post-contextualization. Now, I'm going to go back and use Netflix again. Okay? Because everyone's on Netflix. You're watching Netflix, and sometimes, I don't know if Netflix does this, but I know if you're watching things on regular television, they'll say, okay, next time, and they'll give you a preview of what's going to happen in the next episode, or maybe a preview of what's going to happen in the next season. This is your post-contextualization. Okay, they probably don't do this as much as they used to, but I know when I used to watch TV, 20 years or so, they would give you a preview of the next week's episode, which I guess now I'm thinking about on Netflix, they don't really do that. But this is the post-contextualization, okay? So how do we do that? Number one, you're going to tell me what resulted from what happened in the prompt. So now you can go outside the time period. You can go into the 1700s. This is stuff that happens in the future, okay? So what resulted? What was the effect of everything that happened? So this has been a causation essay. You've been telling me what are the causes. Now you're going to tell me what's the effect. Once again, use an ACE. Come up with an effect of the development of slavery in the British colonies. How did this impact the colonies? I'm going to give you some hints here, because as we've done, I mean, we're only in the 1770s and 80s right now. So, I mean, we're a little bit further ahead than we normally are when we do the first essay. But I'm going to give you some help, okay? I'm going to give you some options. And you can use these. I'm going to give these to you. I'm giving you a gift, okay? Option number one, you can use the expansion of slavery in the 1800s because of the cotton gin. Okay, you probably remember that from 8th grade. Okay, this was a good example. Look, the development of slavery, yes, it's all tobacco and rice and stuff in the 1700s. Well, guess what? In the 1800s, it turns to cotton because of the cotton gin. And then slavery expands dramatically. That's option number one. Option number two, you could talk about how slavery was abolished in New England after the Revolution. Okay, so that, and think about it, why do you think that happens? Slavery is not really big in New England. Slavery is really only big in the South where they have plantation agriculture. There are slaves in New England prior to the Revolution, but it kind of dies out. That's option number two. Option number three, you could go as far as the Civil War, excuse me, and Reconstruction. Okay, so you can go that far advanced if you want. If you know a lot about it right now, then you could use that as an option. Option number four, if you know a whole lot about the mid-1900s, like the 1950s and 1960s, you could talk about the Civil Rights Movement and the impact of American slavery on African Americans in the mid-1900s. And you can even talk about today and that it impacted Black people in this country here in 2020. Okay, so this is post-contextualization. All right, so this is really kind of the only place you're going to get your complexity point. Okay. All right, so let's talk about the outline. This is what the outline looks like. You're going to have a pre-context and a thesis statement in paragraph one. Guys, this is a simple 5-paragraph essay. It's really not that complicated. Paragraph 2 is going to be your economic cause. Paragraph 3 is your political cause. Paragraph 4 is your social cause. Paragraph 5 is your thesis statement restated and your post-contextualization. Okay? That makes sense? It's pretty simple, pretty straightforward. The reason why we do this first is because when we get to the DBQ, then we're just adding one paragraph. And we're making the 3 paragraphs in the middle a little more complicated. Okay? We good so far? All right, I'm going to keep rolling then. All right, let's talk about your rubric. Okay? 1 point, this is a 6-point rubric. Point number 1 is your thesis. Okay? You must have a historically arguable claim. You have to make an argument. So you have to tell me that the economic reasons were the strongest reason why we developed slavery in the colonies. That's your argument. Like I said earlier, it must be located in the introduction and the conclusion. That's not College Board's rule, that's my rule. College Board is going to look for an either or, but I want it in both. So you get in the habit of doing that, and you have a better chance of getting that point. Contextualization. Okay, this is your pre-context and your post-context. In most cases, I'm giving you 2 opportunities to get context, this contextualization point, in the beginning and the end. The reason why I make you do 2 is because if you don't do a good job in one, you have a chance to do a good job in the second one. Maybe you know a whole lot about how we got slavery into this country, but you don't know a whole lot about what happens next. You have 2 opportunities to get that context point. And we're giving you that opportunity to get more points. Excuse me. Evidence. Now, this happens a lot. Students will answer the prompt in their evidence paragraph, and they'll give me an example, but they won't do the explain part. You get 1 point if you can provide me evidence that supports your argument. You give me a point if you answer the prompt and say, well, Bacon's Rebellion caused slavery. That's a point. But you need to give me why it caused slavery, the explanation, as the second point. Okay? So if you give me enough historical examples, then you're going to get 1 point, but you want 2 points, so you got to give me an explanation on how those things actually are significant and led to the development of slavery. Okay? It's very important that you do that. All right, so you're going to get a point if you create an argument. Okay, this should be an easy point to get. If you do this the way I ask you to do it, this point should be automatic. You're creating an argument. You have to tell me that one of the causes is stronger than the other ones. And in your evidence paragraph, you must say the strongest cause of the development of slavery was economic in your body paragraphs. You must say that because that is how you're going to get complexity. That's how you're going to get another point, is by saying the strongest cause is this, the second strongest cause is this, the weakest cause is this. You must say that in your body paragraphs. Okay? For this particular essay, to get the second point, you must have the post context. Okay? So for this particular essay, the only way you can get contextualization is going to be in the beginning, and the only way you're going to get this analysis and reasoning point is in the post context. You're giving me an effect. Okay? That's going to be the only way you're going to get it in this particular essay. So please make sure you do the post context. All right. Here are some final rules on the essays. It must be a 12-point font, Times New Roman only. Okay. I don't care how long your essay is really, but if it's over like 3 pages, I'm not going to read that. That's just too much. I'm reading it to say, did you hit the points on the rubric? Okay. So don't go over 3 pages. That's just too much information. And when you write your essay on the day of the exam, you're not going to have that much time. I mean, you're only going to have 30, 40 minutes. Do not double space. That's too much space. Just do 1.5 if you want to. It must be 5 paragraphs. And please, and students don't do this, and it drives me crazy, please label your contextualization in your thesis, okay? Makes it easier for me to look for these. I'm going to dissect this. I'm going to try to read this as if I'm a grader. I'm probably going to spend 2 or 3 minutes reading your essay. I'm going to be honest with you. 2 or 3 minutes, because if I can't figure out what you're saying in 2 to 3 minutes, then you haven't done your job. This is a very simple, straightforward essay. All right. That is it for me. I'm going to open it up for questions. Anybody have questions? Anybody in the room or online? Anybody? Just shoot them out here at me. I got, this is, because if you don't have any questions, you're good to go. We haven't hammered out a due date for this yet, but it's going to be sometime next week. Keep in mind, the homeworks are still going to be assigned. So you need to pace yourself. Don't do this all in one night. Do a little bit each day. And the pre-write handout is attached to it on Schoology. I would recommend printing it out because normally for my students, like in previous years, we would hand you the handout and you would be handwriting that. You can always type the pre-write, and you need to submit the final draft to me. We haven't decided if we're going to make you turn in the other stuff yet, but for now, I would start working on it. Okay. Any questions? If you don't have any questions, you're good to go. You guys can log off. Any questions here? You guys are good? Make sense? Seems I try to make it as simple as possible. All right. Well, you guys have a few minutes if you want to take. You can take the reading quiz right now if you want to. You have 8 minutes. You should be. I don't know if you have enough time to take it because I think it's 10 minutes long. So you can take it later today if you want to. Okay. Right. You do thesis again. You do thesis, and then you do post context. Yeah, the good question. Because some people will flip it, but no. Think of it like a linear story. You've told me the causes of slavery. You reiterate your thesis, and then you tell me what's next. Like if this was like a show, you would say, okay, what's going to happen in the next show? You do it at the very end. That makes sense? Okay. Does that seem doable? Okay. I know she probably does it a little differently than me, but if you try it this way, I think it's going to be simpler. Although I think she does it very similarly. It's just, I think some of the things I don't know if she does that. Does she do the Y, A, B, and X? She probably does something very similar to it. Okay, yeah, see, in the body paragraphs, see, there is an argument for that because I had students that have done that before, but I've been told by other AP teachers that you want to lead with your strongest point because you might know that the best. And on the day of the exam, like you're more likely, that's how you're going to get your points, is through your strongest. You can do it that way, especially for a homework assignment like this where you're doing it for homework. It's just, I feel like when the AP exam comes around, you're going to do better if you do your strong points first and then you do your weak later. Does that make sense? I feel like that's, but yeah, I mean, I've had plenty of students do it that way. They've done fine. I mean, you can, there's an argument for both. We just like to do it the other way because we think it's a little easier to do it that way first. All right. Karina, did you have a question?